right, and we are live. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jesse, and I am with Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. For those joining us for the first time, we are all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms around the world. And we are really excited because this month of October is our biggest month ever. From the 1st to the end of the month, on the 31st, we will have had 65 sessions with amazing educators, researchers, scientists, and more from around the world. So thanks for being a part of our biggest month ever. Right now, we've got 7 classes joining us from across North America, and I do mean across North America. They're from everywhere. So I'm going to give them a chance to say hi and do a bit of a shout out. We've got Miss Fluitt's grade 1s in Cumberland in Maine. Hi, guys.
All right, guys, say hello.
Hey. Hey. We've got Miss Eagles grade 3s in San Antonio in Texas. Hi, guys. Oh, there's so many of you as always there. We've got Miss Stanley's 4-5s in Petrolia, Ontario. Hi, guys. Hey. Okay, we're breaking records for enthusiasm here. I love it. We've got Mr. Southward's 1-2s in Cochrane, Ontario. Hi, guys. Hey. All right. We've got Miss Brady's grade 6s in Festus in Missouri. Let me just get your mic. There you go. Hi, guys.
Hi.
Hey. You guys are our oldest group today, and we appreciate it. All right. We've got Miss Whitcomb's grade 5s in Anaheim in California. Hi, guys.
Hi.
And last but not least, their mic's giving us a bit of trouble today, but we've got Miss Tornatori's grade 4-5s in Tottenham in Ontario. So just turn it so you can see you guys. Hey. Oh, it works. It works. We did it. Awesome. Way to go. All right. Of course, the reason you guys are here today is for our speaker. So we are joined live in Raleigh, North Carolina at the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences. So they've done a bunch of presentations with us so far on some of the amazing animals that have a home there. But today we're going to meet the Unhuggables, some of the creatures that people are most afraid of or leery of or don't really understand too much about. And so we're going to dive in with some of my favorite creatures. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Martha, joining us there live. And thanks so much for joining us today. And take it away.
We are very excited to be connecting with all of you today. And I am Martha Fisk. I am one of the many educators here at the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences. And I like to call myself a naturalist in addition to being an educator, because it's my job to know about all of the plants and animals and ecosystems that can be found all around. So we focus a lot on what we can find in North Carolina, but we also focus on our connections to other places around the country and also around the world. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. I have 2 of our animal ambassadors here to share with you. They are just entering the room as we speak. And I have a spider and I have a snake. And so we often are talking about the Unhuggables. And sometimes people like to also refer to them as animals that are commonly misunderstood. So if I was to ask you, and you probably can all do this now, I'm going to ask you, raise your hand if you know somebody who is afraid of spiders. And everybody could raise their hand, right? Yeah. And then if you put your hands down, raise your hand if you know somebody that is afraid of snakes. And we could all raise your hand, right? So my hope today is that after meeting some of our animal ambassadors, you can be an ambassador for them, which means that you can share what you know with your friends and your family and hopefully talk about the fun, cool facts about how these animals survive in their environments. And maybe other people will think they're super cool too and maybe be a little bit less afraid next time they might encounter them. So the things we're going to meet today, here is our world map. The star is the general area where I am. And then you all could find yourselves on this map as well. And we're going to be talking about a tropical species of spider today, so a South American species of spider. And we're going to be talking about a North American species of snake. So first, we're going to start off with spiders. And so if I show you my model of the spider here, and we were to zoom down on my spider model, you could look at it and look at all of the special adaptations of spiders. And maybe you remember how spiders are related to other animals without backbones, other invertebrate creatures. Spiders have how many legs? I bet everybody can say it together, all super loud. They have 8. Yes, I can see your mouths moving. 8 legs. They are not the only creatures with 8 legs. They are arachnids. So spiders are related to scorpions, they're related to mites, and they're related to ticks. So 8 legs on our little model here. Super fun things about spiders. They have spinnerets. at the end here. They can make all different kinds of silk, and we're going to look at that in a little bit. They have these extra legs. If you were counting, you might have said, wait a minute, that looks like it could be 10 legs. They actually have these special legs that are called pedipalps. These are their feeling and manipulative legs. They can move their food around with these legs and kind of taste things with these legs. And then, of course, you have the thing that probably everybody is afraid of spiders. It's their fangs, right? So this is where they are delivering their venom when they are biting things. And then we're going to talk a lot about this today, too. All of these eyes, because that's actually one of my favorite things about spiders is all of their many eyes. So when we talk about spiders, I like to talk about, when you're afraid of something, the more you know about it, the less you have to kind of worry about what might happen if you encounter it. So let's talk about how you and I are like a spider. One thing that we do not share in common is an exoskeleton, right? Spiders have an exoskeleton. We have our bones inside of our body. We have a skeleton. But if you were to look at the picture of the internal anatomy of a spider, they do have a little ganglion. They have a little tiny brain. They have a stomach. They have digestive glands and an intestine. They have a heart. So in those regards, they have body systems similar to you and I. They have blood in their bodies, even though it is different than our blood. They breathe with book lungs, which I think is really interesting. It's very different than how we get air into our bodies. And I'm going to flip over the spider here at the model to show you where the book lungs would be. So they are right here on the underside. And maybe you can zoom in again. So it's not something you get to see very often on a live spider, but this is the only spot in a spider's body where air is getting into their bodies. So that is pretty fascinating. And then you could also look at their fangs. So here is a picture of their fangs up close. And looking at their fangs, when a spider molts its exoskeleton, as they're growing, invertebrates have to shed their exoskeleton. As they are molting, they also molt their fangs. So here is the opened exoskeleton of a tarantula that had molted while it was growing. So this spider was still alive when we opened this up so that you could see it. But they basically pull their legs out of these little holes, and they're usually laying upside down. So a molting tarantula is going to be on its back, pulling out of its old exoskeleton, which is also pretty fascinating. If you wanted to see a spider spinning silk, if you take the time to watch spiders in your backyard, you could see this as well in person. They can move their spinnerets independently, and you can see they're kind of pulling them out with their legs. And they can also produce different kinds of silk. So all true spiders make silk. So all true spiders have silk glands, and they use them to make a big web, if that's the kind of spider that they are. They can build them for their egg cases because they hide their eggs in an egg case. And they can also produce the silk to make little trap doors if they're a spider that is hiding and has a little door on the top of its burrow. So here is a picture of a spider egg case with little baby eggs inside of it. They're really cute, I think. On the count of three, everybody should say, oh, because little baby spiders are so cute. So that little white color that you see, this is a spider that has just hatched out of its egg. And after its first molt, it will be a slightly darker color and a different shape. And it will start to change pretty quickly from this initial hatchling phase that you see. A baby spider, you could call it a spiderling. And a tarantula could have 80 spiderlings hatch out of one of its egg cases. So they can have a lot of eggs inside of their egg case. Here is what an egg case might look like from another little spider. Does anybody recognize what this one is?
We can ask one of the classes if you'd like, Martha.
Oh, sure. Okay, so why don't we pick a class and see if anybody has seen that spider before? Anybody know what that one is?
How about Mr. Southward's class? What do you guys think?
What is that?
That's a black. Good job. Yeah. So a black widow is one of the spiders that can make people sick if we are to get bit by them accidentally. The first time I saw one in the wild, I was afraid of it because I had never seen one before. And I just kind of assumed that it was going to get on me and it was going to bite me. And actually, all of the encounters that I've had with black widows have been where I can see them first. And I can watch them in their web. Sometimes they run off and they hide in the little corner where their web is attached to the building. And so you don't get to see them. But all the encounters that I've had with them have been pretty safe. And I've been able to watch them hunt, watch them eat, and just watch them live their own lives without being bitten myself. And so one of the #1 rules for safety with spiders and snakes as well is that you don't put your hands where you can't see them. And if you like to be outside and you like to flip over rocks and logs, just be very intentional about the way that you do that so that you're not surprised by anything that is hiding underneath those little spaces. So for spider safety and for snake safety in general, you never stick your hands, right? Or your feet, you pay attention to where you're walking as well. But black widows are fairly easy to avoid if you follow that rule. And if you keep boots and gloves outside, you always kind of smush the fingers and shake out your glove really well and tap out your boot inside out to make sure that nothing is hidden inside of your shoes either. So black widows are one of our common spiders that live all around North America. Tarantulas, not so much. We do not have tarantulas that live in North Carolina. They live in the central part of the US down into Central and South America, and there's some tropical species from Asia and Africa as well. And so the tarantula that we are going to see is not this one. So here's a picture. This is one of the larger species of tarantulas. This one is a bird-eating tarantula, a Goliath Birdeater. And if you were to think of a dinner plate, this would be about the size of a dinner plate with its legs stretched out. And then another one of the really large species in the world is this one here. And this is a type of huntsman. It also has really long legs. A giant huntsman spider. So I'm going to see, with my tarantulas, one of the hardest things to do is to see them on camera, but I figured you can at least see how we keep them in captivity at the museum. We're going to try and move it around a little bit. I might even take off the top for a moment so that you can kind of see inside. We don't hold our tarantulas at the museum, mostly because we don't want to drop them accidentally, and we also don't want to get bit by accident. So here we can look down from the top and see our tarantula. You can kind of see him hiding there in the corner. So one of the interesting things that we've learned with our tarantulas in captivity at the museum is that each species has some pretty different personality traits. If you know, we don't often talk about them like they're people, but some of them are definitely more active and they will crawl all around on the inside of the cage. And some of them really do prefer to spend most of their time hiding. And so you will see them in this little burrow that they created. And if you look really closely on the ground, you might notice that white filmy appearance. That's actually some silk that the tarantula has laid down on the ground around its little burrow that it's put together here. So again, all spiders can produce silk, including tarantulas, but tarantulas are not building a really giant web to catch flying insects. They are hiding at the bottom of their burrow, or they are actively hunting, looking for insects. They're not spinning a giant capturing web for them. So here, if you wanted to see a tarantula in motion, we have a little video in case our tarantulas don't cooperate, which might happen sometimes. And spiders, of course, are capable of moving really fast. So this one is just sort of doing an exploratory crawl in its habitat. A spider that is feeling threatened will face off with the intruder or the object that's making, or the animal that's making it scared, and it will raise up its front legs and show its fangs. And that's usually one of their really obvious defensive postures. And something that the South American, or sometimes we call them the New World tarantulas, can do. I'm going to show you a video of this in a moment. They can flick those little hairs that you see on their abdomen. They can flick those at a really high speed and make this little flurry of tiny hairs that make a predator's face really itchy. So they can do that as protection as well. And this is what the tarantula hairs look like under a microscope. So they're really fine and they have little barbs on them. And they're called urticating hairs. So here's a picture of how a spider might make all those little hairs fly off of its abdomen. So if you were to see a tarantula in some places in our country, you might see a sign like this, which I think is really funny. Tarantula Crossing. And you'll see, if you were to do a Google search of tarantula crossings in North America, you might see all of these news media or these news clips pop up of people people calling in saying the tarantulas are walking all around in my yard, or I see like hundreds of tarantulas crossing the road, and the males start wandering during breeding season looking for other tarantulas. And so there are periods where you can't drive down the road in certain areas because there's so many spiders out and about crawling around, which I think is pretty cool. I would love to actually go see that myself sometime, as long as they wouldn't crawl on me. I love to watch them in their natural habitat. So one more fun thing, there's two more fun things about spiders. Spiders would be considered a top predator, right? They're the ones that are eating insects. They can eat small mammals like little mice. They can eat small lizards and worms. They can pretty much eat whatever they can catch, especially those really large spiders. But who eats a spider? What kinds of animals eat spiders? Yeah, so you guys can be thinking about that. We can call it another classroom and see if anybody wants to take a guess.
Absolutely. So how about Miss Fluitt's class? What do you guys think? Who eats spiders?
Hey guys, it's not time for you to talk. It's time for us to listen.
Yeah. Oh, Miss Fluitt.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
No, if you want to answer, what eats spiders? What do your class think eats spiders? Okay.
Yeah, so
anything else that would eat a spider?
Insects!
Other insects? Okay, insects, birds. What do you think, Martha?
yes, so those are both correct answers. There's a really long list, but we'll do those too. So birds actually really love to eat spiders. Spiders have a lot of nutrition in them. So you might, if you watch a bird closely, you'll see them kind of hover around a spider web looking to see if they can find spiders. And there's also, when we talk about tarantulas, but this is the case for lots of spiders all around, there is actually a wasp called a Tarantula Hawk. And here is a picture of this Tarantula Hawk. It flies around hunting for tarantulas. It stings the tarantula to stun it. And then it drags the tarantula into the hole that you see behind it, and it lays an egg on the tarantula, and then the wasp's baby hatches out and eats the tarantula. So wasps, we call it parasitism. Wasps actually parasitize spiders. So just like in the insect world, it's fascinating. And I know spiders are not insects, but in the invertebrate world, there's this amazing interrelationship of all of these creatures. So there are wasps that specialize in spider parasitism of spiders. There are wasps that specialize in hunting caterpillars and lay their eggs on caterpillars. There's flies that do all of those things. So they're all really closely connected to each other. It's a fascinating world, that world of invertebrates. So one more thing before we move on to our next animal group is the eyes. Because if you were a scientist studying spiders, one of the things that would help you tell them apart in their groups are the arrangements of their eyes. So here's a picture to show you that. And it's just some of the families of different arachnids. And so in general, most spiders have 8 eyes. Some of them only have 6. But if you were capturing a spider and you were trying to figure out what it was, and you were looking at it under a microscope, this arrangement of eyes and those pedipalps in their fangs would be what would help you figure out who is who. So here is a close-up of a picture of 2 types of spiders. The face on the left is a tarantula face, and the face on the right is a wolf spider. So wolf spiders are the really brown, furry, hairy spiders that are pretty large. They're not tarantula size, but those are fairly common, I think, across all of the places that you and I live. So they're spiders that you can tell apart pretty easily. And we also have these, a female spider versus a male spider. The females tend to be larger and often live longer. And the males often have these little boxing gloves. Their palps, the ends of their pedipalps look like little boxing gloves. So if you ever were careful to catch a spider, to look at it up close, I'll show you my little cup and spider trick, right? From above. My favorite way to catch spiders in my house is to get a cup and put it over, right? And then you carefully take the spider away and let it go outside instead of squishing it, so that you can't both look at it and also release it back outdoors. Although I know some people, especially at the museum, they let the spiders kind of live in the dark corners of their house. So they stay under the couch, or they stay up in the corner in the pantry, just because they know that they're spiders that are not harmful to us. All right, so that is our first misunderstood animal of this morning, is spiders and the arachnids. And I hope that you enjoyed learning a little bit about them. I have our next animal group that we can meet. And should I say, is this a good time to take spider questions, or should we wait at the end to ask some different questions, you think?
I think we'll do all the questions together at the end just to attempt to work a little better, and we'll dive in with snakes.
Sounds great. All right, so our next group is snakes. So snakes have even more in common with us as an animal group. So here's the picture of one of the easiest ways that we share a lot in common with snakes, and it has to do with their skeleton. So we have 33 bones in our spine. Snakes can have 150 or more bones in their spine. And if you were looking at this picture, you would notice all of the little skinny bones sticking off to the side. Those are ribs. You and I have ribs as well. We have teeth too, of course. Our teeth are a lot different than a snake's tooth. And here is my skull to show you this. So I have a model of a python skull. This is a reticulated python. And so boas and pythons are just one of the groups of snakes that can be found around the world. We have 2 species in North America. So here, opening it up, we have our curved teeth on the top and bottom jaws. And snakes can replace their teeth for their whole lives. So you and I, we have our baby teeth we grow. We lose those, we get our adult teeth. That's it for us. Reptiles, like snakes, they can shed their teeth and grow new teeth for their entire life, which makes sense if you're an animal that is relying on your mouth to help you catch your food and eat it. You don't have arms or legs. You need your teeth to be replaceable, or you wouldn't really be able to continue eating. Snakes can live a really long time. Small corn snakes, I knew someone who had one until it was about 20. The larger pythons can be 30, 40, 50, 60 years old. So that's a long time to live as a snake. So some have 2 rows of teeth on their top jaw, like this one, like the python. And some just have 1 row on the top and 1 row on the bottom. There are venomous snakes that have fangs in the rear of their mouth, like cobras and coral snakes. And then there are the vipers that have the fangs at the front of their mouth. So that's like in my picture. If we go back to that picture of all of the bones and the skeleton, you'll see those fangs at the front. And how about snake anatomy? They have a heart. They have just 1 lung usually. Actually, you and I have 2 fully functioning ones. Snakes typically just have 1 functioning lung. They have a liver, they have a stomach, a gallbladder, an intestine, a kidney. So they have a lot of the same body systems that you and I have. The smallest snake is a thread snake. And the largest snake is the reticulated python. So these are from Asia. They are up to 30 feet in length. And then the green anaconda is the heaviest and the longest. So it is more in the mid-20s foot long of range. So 25, 26 feet, which is still really big, but they can be like 500 pounds. So not only are they long, they're really big around too. And a lot of these snakes are living in places where there's water, because if you're that heavy and long, it helps to be able to move and take some of the pressure off your body by living in a wet habitat. It's easier for you to move around. So what about snakes eating? If we're thinking about what snakes eat, some of you might be eating lunch. I'm going to show you some pictures of snakes eating their lunch. And this is going to be really different than what you and I are eating too, or how we eat, right? Because snakes can extend their mouth really big. So here's a snake eating an egg. And once the egg gets to the back of their throat, the egg will crack and the eggshells everything will go through the digestive system, but they will be eating the yolk, not really the eggshells. They're going to be eating rodents and mammals, and they're going to be eating these things head first, because that's easier for the animal to go down the esophagus. They don't want all the legs kind of sticking out and getting stuck. So eating head first is how the snake will be eating its prey. Mammals, lizards, snakes, head first is the way to go. They are also eating fish. So we have a lot of aquatic snakes, a lot of water snakes, and they can bite underwater to grab hold of their food. This is a northern water snake catching a fish, and I've seen it myself. It's really fascinating. They can eat crayfish and frogs, salamanders, other snakes, birds. They're kind of eating whatever is nearby, a really wide, varied diet. And if your mouth is full of food, you need to be able to breathe. So here we have the glottis. So this is the tube that can be extended out the side of a snake's mouth. If it takes them a long time to digest their food, This can be extended to help them to breathe in air. You might see a pit viper. Pit vipers have just between the nostril and the eyeball, that is the heat sensing pit that allows the snakes to sense the heat coming from their prey. So rattlesnakes, cottonmouths, copperheads, these are all venomous snakes that we have in North Carolina. They have, in North America, they have pits in their face, and we call them pit vipers. Here's one example. We talk a lot in North America about the triangular head, where the venom glands are on kind of the backs of the triangle there. So this is a cottonmouth. And this is another northern water snake. Notice how this snake is making its head look bigger and triangular. So when you and I are learning to tell snakes apart, it's really important that we keep lots of factors in mind, like where we are, what is the snake doing, what is its pattern, because this is a non-venomous snake that looks a lot like this one. So it takes some practice. They can swim like we were talking about. And if you wanted to see their eyes, the snake pupils of most non-venomous snakes in North America are round like you and I, and venomous snakes like cottonmouths and copperheads, they have a pupil that's like a cat, that's like this picture. But I like to joke that if you can see a snake's pupils, what's probably wrong with your scenario? You're probably too close, right? But you get used to kind of looking at their features, and then it's just one of the ways that you can help, that teaches you to tell them apart. So if you were ever to visit us in Raleigh, and probably some of your museums and science centers have some venomous snakes on display as well. Zoos also have lots of different venomous snakes from all around the world. You could go see them in person and practice. You can look them up online and see videos of them and pictures of them. We have the same in North Carolina and at our museum, but I don't have special training to work with our venomous snakes. So we try to use proper tools and proper areas to keep everybody safe. So the snake that I have to share with you today is a non-venomous snake, but it's one of our favorites to talk about. And here is a picture of what it looks like. You may have seen this type of snake before. It is called a pine snake. And if you are paying attention really closely to this picture, you might notice that you see some pine needles at the bottom of the pine tree. There's brown ones and there's green ones from a tree that's growing. And the soil looks a little gray and sandy. This is a snake that likes to burrow. And it can burrow it can burrow 10 inches into the ground or more, hiding and looking for its prey. And so one of the things that the pine snake is super famous for is what I'm going to show you in this video. So, interpreting animal behavior. If you were to encounter a snake doing that in the wild, what would you do?
Let's ask. How about Miss Stanley's class? What would you guys do if you saw a snake doing that?
Go ahead, Sophia. We can also walk away.
Walk away.
Yes. You would leave it alone and walk away. And that is exactly what a snake in the wild is trying to tell you with that kind of behavior. It's a defensive posture and a defensive behavior. Rattlesnakes can hiss. Rattlesnakes have the rattle at the end of their tail, but they can actually rattle for hours if they needed to let others know around them that they are there so that they can keep themselves safe too. Lots of other snakes will rattle their tail in the leaves to make a loud sound, and I've had that happen to me too. And what do you think I did? Woo! So it scares you and it works, but it gets your attention so that you know that something is there. So while I'm talking to you, I'm sort of fiddling around with my bag here. When we are taking our snakes out as ambassadors, when they're working, they travel in this two-part system here. It's this box with a pillowcase, and then I had these clips on the outside, and this is to keep the snakes from escaping. So I like to joke when I travel around to different areas outside of the museum that the person who invited me to come wants me to leave a snake behind or leave a spider behind when I'm done, but we want everything to come back to the museum, and so this is how we do that. This is not where the snake stays all day long, it's just temporary. Here we have our pine snake, and this is one of our large snakes in North Carolina, and I'm going to take it out all the way. But they have beautiful black and cream patterning. And they can be very active as an animal ambassador. And here we go. You can see how long it is. And so it's going to crawl all around. I'm going to move its box out of the way so that you can watch it move around. But when we are using animals as teachers and helping people to overcome their fears, we want you to focus on the colors and patterns that you see and the behavior of the snake that lives in captivity. You can see how their body moves around and how strong they must be. They have been on Earth for millions of years. So this is an animal that has survived some pretty major changes on its planet. And so the biggest challenges that snakes have today are how humans are changing its planet and changing its ecosystems. So you and I can help by learning to tell them apart so that we don't feel worried and in danger when we encounter snakes, so that maybe we can let them be where we find them. And we can help by paying attention if we're driving or riding a bicycle so that we don't run them over by accident, because they cross the road just like you and I do. I don't know if you heard that sound. That was the sound of the clip being thrown to the ground. So you can see how busy this snake is. It's an armful for me to hold. And it is a constrictor. So it would grab the food with its mouth, and then it would wrap around until the food was dead. And if we do a quick zoom in on their face, this one has, its head is about, oops, here we go. Its head is about the same width as the rest of its body. And so that's often a feature of a non-venomous snake. And I don't know if you can kind of hear it hissing, but it's fairly faint. So you probably cannot hear that. If we were to talk about the colors and the patterns and the shapes and structures of scales, scales are made on reptiles are made of keratin, which is what we have in our fingernails and in our hair. It's a little bit different structurally if you were to look at it under a microscope. But when you're talking about colors, dark colors in the animal world, like the colors that you see here, the structure of these colors is much harder and is more durable than in light colored scales and feathers. So for an animal that is burrowing in the ground, it makes sense that it would have these kinds of colors on its body. So at the museum, we feed them rodents, mostly mice. It's something that we can provide easily in captivity. In the wild, they could be eating mice and rats. There's all different kinds of native species in their habitat. There are voles and moles that are burrowing in the ground with them as well. So they could be eating those kinds of animals as well. And I've never seen one in the wild, and it is because they burrow. So they're hard to find. They're spending most of their time hiding in the ground. So it's a real treat for us to be able to use it as one of our teaching tools. He's going to type on the computer keys for me as fast as he's moving around. And some of our scientists at the museum, when they try to study these, because they are so hard to find, they actually implant little transmitters surgically in their bodies, and they work with our veterinarian team. And then they have a big tower, a big transmitter that they hold out, and they will track the snakes to see how they're using their habitat and how they move from point A to point B. And then they can tell individuals apart that way, and they can weigh and measure them. But that's some of the science that we've been doing for this pine snake, the northern pine snake, to learn how it's using its habitat, how the population is doing. Where are they in North Carolina? What do we need to do to help keep them safe and continuing to survive in the wild? And one more thing for this snake, or yourselves, if you love reptiles and amphibians, so snakes, turtles, alligators and crocodiles, lizards, frogs and toads and salamanders, you can be a herpetologist. So those are the scientists that study reptiles and amphibians, herpetologists, and we have several on staff at our museum. But these are people who are traveling all around their countries or the world studying these kinds of animals. And there's about 3,000 snakes, probably a little bit more now, that can be found all around the world. So really interesting group of animals. So I think that's a good stopping point for me. Yeah, so I could take some questions.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Martha, for that amazing.
You're welcome.
Actually, before we dive in with questions, my first question is going to be, because we're going to have more questions that we can possibly take.
Oh, of course.
Ask questions to you guys generally. Is there a place online on your website or anything where people can go?
So we do have, I should send you the link. We do have, it's called, I think Ask a Naturalist, but I don't have the the link for you right now, but I can send that to you and we could include that in the future.
That would be amazing. Excellent.
Okay.
All right. So we're probably going to get time for one question per class that's live. And we've got about 7 groups watching from all across Connecticut, New Jersey, Ontario on YouTube. So if the teachers there want to type in their questions too, I'll happily pass them along.
Okay.
Let's begin with Miss Eagle's class. If you guys want to kick us off in Texas, come on up.
Can snakes and spiders get sick?
Oh, they can. So there's actually some funguses that have been introduced from other countries into North America, and it makes some of our snakes really sick, and they have a hard time shedding their skin, and they can get sick just like you and I do. It's true. And then for spiders, they might have a hard time molting their exoskeleton, and so they get stuck in their skin basically, and are not able to grow properly. So they can get sick. And so we have special veterinarians that are trained to treat spiders even, spiders and our reptiles and amphibians.
And that is the ultimate niche jobs. I like it.
Yes.
Let's go to Miss Staley's class. If you guys have a question, come on up, guys.
What are the black widows, predators, or prey?
What are the black widows, predators, or prey? So I would say that birds or lizards would probably be the most likely predators on those spiders.
Yeah.
They're typically very good at hiding under things. And so it's kind of hard for predators to find them actually because of their behavior, but they can get eaten by those things.
Okay. And then prey, are they eating just insects and other little snakes?
Oh, they're just eating insects, whatever insects, kind of little flies and midges and maybe little moths that kind of fly up under the areas where they're hiding. Yeah. I actually kept a black widow temporarily to bring to the museum, and I had it in a little container on my kitchen counter. I don't recommend this, but I did this so that we had one as a teaching tool at the museum, and I had to catch house flies that got into my house to feed the spider. So they like flies too.
Very cool. All right, I was going to say that you're the first person to ever do a Q&A with a snake in your lap.
I know, I'll let it. I can continue to hold it for a little longer. We'll see what it does.
No. Whatever is easiest.
Okay.
But yeah, let's head to Miss Fluid's class. If you guys have a question, come on up.
How long do spiders live?
Oh, yeah. So a lot of our spiders in North America are smaller spiders. It's typically just one season, so like maybe for the summer. Some of them will overwinter until the following year, so maybe almost a year, so that they can lay their eggs in their egg case and continue the next generation. Larger spiders like tarantulas, the female spiders, they can live 25 years, 30 years. So they live a lot longer than our smaller spiders that we see a lot.
Very cool, Martha. All right, I'm going to pass on the first question from YouTube. Sure. From Mr. Brock's class, grade 7/8 in Tweed, Ontario, and they want to know, how many ribs might a snake have?
Oh, so if they had 150 backbones, 150 vertebrae, they have 2 ribs per vertebrae, I think. So 150 times 2.
Yeah, we got 300 ribs, so a little bit more than you guys have.
Yeah,
all
just
right.
a little.
Mr. Southward's class, if you guys have a question, go on up.
Yeah, we do.
Okay.
Well, can you tell if it's a boy or a girl?
Snake.
For a snake. Okay, thank you. Yeah, so most of the time with reptiles, their reproductive parts are how we tell them apart. Sometimes their size and color can be a little different, but usually it's for the reproductive parts and it's inside of their body. So it can actually be really difficult to tell them apart unless you're a veterinarian and you have to do an exam on them. Snakes only have one opening in their body at the end called the cloaca. And so that's where they go to the bathroom, and that is where their eggs come out of. And so the veterinarian would do an exam there to tell if it's a boy or a girl.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Great question, guys. All right, Miss Brady's class. Come on up, guys.
And I put the snake away because it was really starting to move around a lot.
Actually had to leave. They have to go to their next class, but thank you.
Okay, all right. Thank you, everyone.
Okay.
Nope, all good. Perfect.
They're walking out. Okay. Bye, guys.
All right, Miss Whitcomb's class. Come on up, guys, and ask away.
My name is Adrian, and I was wondering, how much teeth do the snakes have?
How many teeth do they have?
Yeah.
So I'm going to give you a general answer here, and I would say it's about 60 teeth. Looking at my skull, a lot of teeth. Yes.
And fantastic.
A lot more teeth than you and I.
if you look at the python's teeth, seeing them curl backwards like that, that's for gripping into the flesh, which is really neat. And then if you look at venomous snakes with the huge, fangs at the front, there's some really fantastic skulls out there that are snakes. And so you can get a sense of this with a reticulated python there. It's just beautiful. All right. Second question from a class on YouTube. So Miss Mosenson's class, who's joining us from Freehold, New Jersey, wanted to ask, what's the largest snake you've ever handled?
Oh, me. I would say an indigo snake. You have to look it up. I don't have a picture, but I'm 5'2", and the snake was 6 feet long, and so it was just like dangling off of me like this. And they're really big and black. They're beautiful. They're from the southeastern United States. So indigo snakes.
Prettiest snakes in the world. I'm really glad.
Yes, they are really pretty.
All right, and then we're going to wrap up with a question from Miss Tornatori's class. If you guys have a question to end us off, come on up, guys.
Okay.
What is a snake's most biggest predator?
Snakes' biggest, what are their predators?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so there are birds like hawks that will eat snakes. Other snakes will hunt snakes. Snakes that live in the water get eaten by catfish and snapping turtles. Snakes get eaten by raccoons and bobcats and coyotes. So a lot of different creatures eat snakes. It's kind of a little bit of everything depending on where they live and what they encounter the most.
Yeah, very cool. All right, I was going to wrap up, but I feel really bad because there's a student in Miss Eagle's class who's been standing by the camera for some time.
Oh, that's fine.
Go to her first and then go for it right here. And then hey.
How do you catch the animals?
Yeah.
So most of the time we try to get animals that are bred in captivity. So we try not to go out and capture wild animals. So that's for our animal ambassadors. If we are research scientists and we are studying snakes, we set out some of them are traps. So for water snakes, you can set up a kind of a mesh, looks like a big tube, and the snake can get in. For food, we put some food in there, but the snake can't get out. So that's one way that we could catch snakes. We also put something out that's called a cover board, and it's like a big piece of tin, a big piece of metal, or a big piece of wood. And snakes like to hide under those objects for shelter. So you can set them out in habitat in different areas, and the snakes will be naturally drawn to that. And so as a scientist, you would go along and you would check those same areas. And if you pulled the cover board back and there was a snake there, you have a special snake hook at the end. It has a little hook, and it's long enough to keep you safe to move the snake around if it's a venomous snake. So that would be how we would handle a snake in the wild.
Very cool. I'm so glad we get that brought up. Whenever we have museums or zoos or aquaria, it's a great question to ask how they end up getting there.
Yeah.
I'm really happy we had that covered. Martha, before we wrap up, again, we could probably talk all day with some amazing things about snakes and spiders and more. Is there any last message you want to share about where kids can go learn more about either group of creatures, more about the museum, and we'll pass that all along in a link at the end.
Yeah, so I would say it's great to find out more about all of the snakes and spiders that can be found around the world. But I love for everyone to become familiar with what they encounter in their own backyards. So I would encourage you to look at your wildlife resources agencies that list animals that you can find, and try and get some books and look them up online so that you can become ambassadors for what you share your immediate habitat with, because that's really important that we protect what is nearby us as well.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought it going into your backyard. I mean, when I was a kid, just going in your backyard, you can probably find, so I found 72 species in 2 hours of insects and spiders and amazing things. And pretty much anywhere you are, that's the case. There's some incredible creatures in the undergrowth.
It's very true.
Yeah, so we'll pass along more resources the moment we're done. Well, Martha, that was fantastic. And what we do at the end of every presentation, I'm going to demute everyone's microphone. And so boys and girls, if you guys could join me in saying a huge thank you to Martha and the team there for joining us today. You are all now demuted. Go right ahead.
Thank you.
I love the enthusiasm. All right. Thank you so much for joining us today as part of our amazing month of October. We look forward to having you all back. And Martha, thanks again. That was fantastic.
Have a great day, everyone.